So welcome to the podcast, everybody. This week I have a guest, and I'm almost like fanboy today because this is one of my favorites. When I first, you may not know this, Karla, but this is Rev Karla Kamstra, and she's Rev Karla on TikTok. And you were like my first TikTok follow, I think. And I've only been in the TikTok world for, I don't know, 6-8 months. But really, you were my first follow, and I just loved seeing your stuff. So I just wanted you to know that before I introduce you. So I'm a big fan here talking to you today.
I'm honored.
So Kamstra, that's right. I've got your last name right?
Yes, yes.
Reverend Karla Kamstra. She's an ordained interfaith, I can't even read my own writing.
That's
You're
okay.
Interfaith minister. And tell us more. You have some mantras, a little bit of how your faith and spirituality and how you're ministering to people.
Sure. I'm honored to do that. And I'm honored to be here too. It's so refreshing to find content from people who would be labeled progressive clergy, but I just consider us kindred spirits. So I don't need those definitions for us, but that seems to be what people are doing. They're putting us all in a bucket, and I'm fine with that. But I'm an ordained interfaith, interspiritual minister. And for the longest time, even I left off the interspiritual because interfaith was enough. That was a little jarring for people to say, wait, what is that? What denomination is that? And it's not denominational, but it's also more interreligion. If you want to look at one of the mantras that we used inside seminary was the truth in all religions, the wisdom in all religions. And that's actually hanging up on my wall in my office, because we believe that there are many sacred paths to God, and they're all valid, and each religion holds some element of truth to that. As my grandmother used to say, we all have just a little bit right, meaning we all have a lot wrong. The interspiritual part just says that we can also find those paths to the holy, to God, whatever name that you give this divine presence, this universal mystery that can be held, that same sacredness can be found outside of organized religion. So in my experience, as I navigated away from evangelical Christianity, which is my religious heritage, I found myself on the spiritual but not religious path. So that's where I am, and that's the path I hold. Now, as far as my taglines, that's what I say. Spiritual but not religious is a sacred and valid path to the divine. God is big enough to share. Religion does not own God. Being gay is not a sin. So those are my big ones. I also say spiritual but not religious. It's a thing. So those are the big ones. And that's what I've built my platform on, to keep it simple for people. And also the other one that I protect vehemently, especially when I talk about it on TikTok, which is the religious trauma aspect, and how important it is to guard those who are seeking healing from any kind of spiritual abuse or religious trauma. And we know we're talking to those people, as I know you are as well, and several of our allies in this work, because of the comments and the stories, the way people are willing to show up in that vulnerable space and tell their story about the hurt that they're carrying, and they're ready to release. So that's a big part of what I do.
Yeah, and I think you do that great, and that's what I really love about your content. But let's talk more about how you got here first before we go deeper into that. So where were you in life? You said you had an evangelical religious heritage. Where were you in life when that started to change, and what did that journey of change look like?
Even now, I'm having awareness of how long ago I was spiraling out of Christianity, what I call organized Christianity, because like I still hold on to my Christian roots, even though people try to kick me out of the club. There's no one person or rule book that gets to do that. So we get to hold on to that identity as we find sacred and holy. And I still do. My relationship with Jesus has changed, but it's still there. So I can honestly say that even as early as 9 or 10, when I was questioning, when I desired to know something on a different level, those felt characters on the felt wall where we're talking about Jacob and going on, that just did not hold my attention. That was all too trite for me. I wanted to be in the adult
flannel graphs, I think.
There you go. That's what they were.
Graphs.
Flannel graphs. I just thought, what is this? This is so oversimplified. But my grandmother, being the devout Southern Baptist that she was, and being also an intuitive, which she probably would never have used those words in her time, saw that in me. So she it wasn't just a desire to be with her, it was a desire to understand this. So I was in Sunday school with her. I was in church on Sunday nights. I was there. You remember the Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night Bible studies,
Oh, yeah.
the revivals, the tent revivals. We're talking about the hills, deep hills of Kentucky, where those revival came. And I was fascinated by those ministers that came through. And I can remember some of those sermons of those times. I just gobbled it up, but it ended up having a lot of questions, things that didn't align for me. So when I started to push back in the inconsistencies, the things that I was told was I had a doubter's mind. I had a weak faith. I wasn't trusting the leadership enough. And so then I would try to dive deeper into it because I wanted to accept that as a challenge, to show them that I could be what they were saying that I wasn't what they said I was. So instead of rejecting it, I would dive deeper to prove them that, no, this isn't about doubt of faith. This is about, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I would dive deeper only to be bounced back more. I never caught on until the very end. When I'm in my 50s, I'll be 60 in October. So this has been going on a long time. I gave Christianity a lot of chances. And at the very end, I finally came to the realization that the God I was finding inside this religious path was being contained in a small box. And even though that can serve others, so that's my experience, that's not a judgment on anybody else's, it did not fit my spiritual journey. I was being called out to understand God in a different way. So that same God who traversed me through this experience, I really believe to assure me that once I was ready to spiral away from it, I would be content. So even though the people who would say, you just didn't find the right church, you just didn't have the right leaders, you just didn't get your questions, you asked the wrong questions, those people who dismiss that I understand where they're coming from, but that also doesn't trigger me to try to defend my journey. That I knew in my heart that this was going to be my path, that this Christianity was leading me to the spiritual but not religious path. And even though I am on a firm foundation with my Christian heritage, at the young age of 54,
Wow.
around there is when all of this happened. We're not talking, people are often shocked when they hear, no, we're talking just several years ago where I left and found myself in that proverbial spiritual wilderness, which, because I had my heritage with my grandmother, I understood that this could be sacred territory. Some people will find themselves, and I know this anecdotally as I prepare my content for my videos and the things I write, is that proverbial wilderness is a real scary time for people. And that's where they give up. That's where because they are still filtering some of their truth through their belief system, which convinces them that they just lost a conduit to the holy. So How can we catch them? Pastor Paul, how can we catch them before they hit and give up? And so that's what I think the work that we're doing here is so sacred, because we're building that bridge between when they decide to give up, when they leave, which the statistics tell us they are, and they traverse into this unknown, but they're still filtering some of that belief that tells them that they just lost a conduit, and they believe it. But the pain is too much for them to turn back and try to find it inside the way it's constructed inside religion. But I intuitively knew it. So I went on a journey and went to study biblical studies. And then I went to study world religions. And that's where I really...
And those are at Christian universities?
Yes, at first it was Indiana Wesleyan. And then I went, wait a minute, I know this stuff. I've been cycling through this my entire life. But I still was, again, that belief system. I left church, but I was still seeing it through that belief system. Like, no, this isn't it. Then I went to Arizona State University, a great online studies, by the way. And the first class had me on my knees in tears, because even though I knew it, I needed to hear it. And when I did, I lost the last that last bridge just collapsed. That could have maybe had me turning back to fake it in the pews. I no longer had that choice. And so even though it might sound trite to say I lost my religious Santa Claus, that's really what happened for me. Because then now I'm in it. And now I know what I always knew to be true. And I needed to dive in. So I did. And I studied. And then I went on to seminary. And that's where I found my interfaith seminary. I'm sorry. I turned off my phone.
It's okay.
And,
So this is what we do these days.
Yeah.
We all have dogs or kids or something going on in our Zooms.
Yes, that's true. So that's how I ended up here, even though I knew I was being called to a ministry. I didn't even know when it was going to be. If anything, it could have been the period on my journey of spirituality. I wasn't sure what this was going to end up being.
Wow.
My journey.
There is a lot there. So what does God look like for you now in your life?
I think probably one of the hardest things for me was for the longest time after I left Christianity, and I'm very quick to point out evangelical Christianity, I couldn't say God because I didn't understand it. But all I knew was that the God I had found was too hurtful and judgmental and punishing and even dehumanizing. And so, and controlling.
And certainly he didn't like women very much, right?
There you go. Exactly. I couldn't say it for the longest time. And I tell this story, but on the last day of our retreat, before we are to be ordained, we have 5 or 6 hours of silence. And I had picked up a lot of practices from meditation in the Buddhist tradition and the Hindu tradition, and listening to those musics and the meditation music to go around that. But something else was calling me during that time. And I pick up my playlist, and there were the old hymns that I had in my playlist. And I hadn't listened to those in years. And I pressed play. So we're talking an hour before I am to be ordained. I sat and I listened to those hymns again. It's going to make me cry. And
that's okay.
I rediscovered my love for the God and Jesus of my heritage, because what hurt me was human's definition, not what was my truth, my experience. And I fell back in love. But I'm also willing now to release God to be what God is in the universal form. And so I'm very conscious of how I describe God. Now, every once in a while, I'll still go back to a patriarchal language because it's there. I'm from Kentucky, so every once in a while, a hill, which you climb to get up to the top, becomes a heel. So it's still there. But that part of being an interfaith, interspiritual minister means that you try to hold that space that invites everyone to that universal experience. So 10 years ago, that would have felt very foreign to describe anything other than a literal description of God. And now that would feel very restrictive and judgmental to do that. So the God that I have is yes.
That's good. Yeah, I have that conversation a lot with people because I've dabbled and journeyed into all of that and even had my atheist pagan period of life. But I just kind of tell people now, I understand it's a socialization, but I just can't help but see the God that I knew as a kid that like I said, I fell in love with. So is it okay if that's my picture of God and live with that? And I find that most people are pretty accepting as long as, like you said, I think we've just got to get to a place where we can say God is big enough to find us where we are. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we have to come this one particular path. I think he's going to find us.
Absolutely.
There I go. Right
that and that's okay. That's not a trigger word for me at all,
okay,
because I understand what you're saying. And I do think that on this side of spirituality, where we understand the expansiveness, where we allow language that necessarily wasn't part of our religious heritage, it's still we find comfort in those definitions. It helps us just define that. But outside in this expansiveness of spirituality, you'll still find militant views. You'll still find the kind where, no, you can't do that. You must reject that. And you want to be careful about walking that line. And I think especially as pastors, we're called to a higher level of examples on what that looks like. And that makes me, and that I don't mean that from a place of calling God he, as far as saying you can or can't do this. Right. What's your truth versus what's mine? And in the end, we end up in the same place.
Yeah. And I don't know why, it's just beautiful, I think, to be able to love each other enough to say, I'm going to be where you are. And when we're together.
Amen.
And so if me speaking of a patriarchal God hits a traumatic place for you, then why wouldn't I accommodate that and be willing to just let God be what's going to make us all feel safe together? So I love that. And so I do want to talk, you talk about ministering to people in religious trauma. So how are you seeing that? What does that look like? And are you seeing a lot of it out there as you're ministering in some in the TikTok world and in the world outside of TikTok?
Yeah. So right after I was ordained in 2017. And so I started doing a little writing online, but not a lot, not real intentional, just as I felt called to write something like, oh, look, here's a writing, go post that. But the primary thing that I did was what I call spiritual care. And I'm very careful about the language I use around that, because I do not want to minimize what therapists or licensed counselors or anything do. But there comes a point in people's life where sometimes the spiritual crack in the armor allows for a place for you to come in when something in life's not working anymore. So I would be that safe space. So I always considered it like triage. When you're in an ER room, the job is to get the patient stable to move them on to the experts. And that's what was my job. I knew my limitations and I stayed within the realm. So a lot of times the people that I worked with would then move on to work with a therapist. So often that's what I did, was the one-on-one. Then on the larger scale, when I started talking about religious trauma in my videos, I have to say that I have been even humbled by the response. And especially when we talk about our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters and the condemnation and the dehumanization that's happened in the name of Christianity, in the name of religion. There's many across the globe, much persecution for those humans. So I have been surprised, and I think almost embarrassed, that I did not know how bad it was. And on the other side of that the number of people who did not know that was even a thing, that they knew that they had rejected religion, but they didn't know that now they had a definition for it. And depending on where you are in your life, most of us have some kind of trauma. How we deal with it and how life triggers us is a very important aspect of what we should be aware of. So if you then add religious trauma onto that, then you're just layering another level of trigger that needs to be worked through a licensed therapy program. But sometimes spiritual care, again, is that first aspect to give you permission to say, this hurts, and it is impacting the way I show up in my world. I am not able to process my life. So you'll see me get more deeper into that now that I consider, in these marketing terms, Pastor Paul, where I'm learning as a boomer, it's what is this and what does this thing do? I don't want this. I don't want this filter on my face. I'm okay with being seen with all these things that I'm trying to always learn. I've been in this, what they call the like, no, trust phase. And that if you've been on TikTok for about 6 or 8 months, you are in that as well. And you're walking it beautifully, even though you don't know it. And it's that time where people just get to know you and trust you. And then there comes a time for you to go a little deeper. And so I've just hit that. And I think you can see it, you can sense it in my messages are more direct. My words are more candid, and that is needed. We cannot be afraid of what that's going to look like if people see that as critical, because what I always say is, I'm not going to let you stop me from talking to the people who are hurting just because you're offended that you're the one who hurt them.
Mm.
And I'm talking to them now. So I keep that in the back of my head when I get a lot of pushback on some of these videos. And you'll see me be more vocal in my comments when I push back. And that's intentional as we start to make sure that these people feel who have been hurt by organized religion and are carrying religious trauma, know that they're seen and they're safe and they're loved and they're heard. So I think that's something that we have a gift here on these larger platforms, as your platform is growing as well, to hold those spaces and do it in a way that shows the sacredness of what we're doing. So that's what you'll see me get more direct about some of the things that we talked here specifically, and then also how to start healing it. But there will always be an element of some kind of licensed mental care. This is not about me putting on a cape and saying, I have all the answers. I can just point you to some resources.
Yeah, I'm just finding that people need us to say, you're okay, and we're sorry. And I still have a lot of friends that pastor evangelical churches. And sometimes I feel sorry for them because they're like, Paul, you're being really mean to us. Just like the law keepers came to Jesus and said, hey, you're insulting us. And then he insulted them again for the next 7 verses or so. But I think you said too, like, I haven't realized the pain that we've caused. I haven't realized, and particularly say with the LGBTQIA plus people, and just the real damage we've done to that group of folks in our society. But even a lot of older millennial young women now are saying, hey, that purity culture, those purity rings, those dress right, were really damaging to young women. And so I am finding that it's important for somebody like me to say, gosh, we're sorry. That was really wrong. What happened? And then try to talk to my evangelical friends and say, can we stop? Let's just stop being so hung up about sex. Maybe let's just start there and not be so hung up about these things. And maybe we'll stop hurting people. And truly, I think, Rev Karla, that Christians think they're not doing it. They think they're loving. But when you get out on this side and look and see, and I was a senior pastor for 10 years, and I've been out for 2 now, you just start to see the pain that we're causing people.
That is very revealing. And I'm honored to hold that space as you process some of that. And I see you, and I don't say this lightly, because you have some mega church pastors who have moved on to some very influential careers as they process some of the damage that they've done, and now moved into a place where they're trying to heal some of that hurt. So I think you are in a very opportunistic role that I no longer have. Most of my access to the evangelical community has been cut off. And I struggled with that for a while, but I'm okay with it because I'm pretty much spiritual but not religious. Ordained interfaith minister is going to be pretty much a line in the sand for anyone who's looking at me and wondering what my journey is. But without sounding too argumentative, or I don't mean to be like shocking about this, but I do think that there is a day of reckoning that's coming for Christianity. And I don't think that's not eschatological in nature at all. We'll stay away from Revelations and all that, all the end times conversations. But what I do believe, the data, that we have a very fast decline in the people who are identifying with the Christian heritage here in America. And the fastest growing group of people who are identifying as the spiritual but not religious, and now claiming it, not afraid to say it. Those are statistics that are quantifiable. So just saying that the reason I left is because I'm spiritual light, or that I just refuse to hear the truth, that is not going to cut it anymore. And there's this entrenchment into sticking to like the 3 or 4 of the dogmatic beliefs where humanity is moving on past it. And if you just go back a few hundred years, folks, and look at how religion has changed, religion has evolved, including Christianity, then that's going to be the hill that you die on. And for the longest time, I had a hard time using one of the books that during my spiritual wilderness, one of the books I read was Christianity Must Change or Die. And I hid that book because I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want anybody to know I was reading it. And I think this may have been 2020 must have been the first year that I said it out loud. But now I believe it. And people who want to accuse me of being anti-Christian need to hear this. That would break my heart. I believe that religion has its place when it's about nurturing the soul and not manipulating the soul to perpetuate the institution. And so I just wish that the people who are in charge, if you're listening out there, it is okay to evolve. It's okay to release things and still be relevant and still do things that could really change lives and nurture souls. So I hope that becomes something that happens. I don't know if it's possible.
I just want to affirm what you're saying. I think you're so right on. And how I read Jesus and the story of Jesus has changed so much over the last few years for me. But I think he was saying the same thing you're saying. I think he came and said, see, this religious system, it has to go. This system has to come to an end because now it's a bondage on people and I've come to set people free. So he pointed at the temple and said, not a stone of that thing's going to stand on top of another. And then we see in the book of Hebrews this, hey, that had to go away. It didn't set people free. It didn't give people a great connection to God. And I think Jesus was like, hey, I came to just say, you get to hang out with God. That's it. You don't need this religion. And so I think we're exactly there. And so I'm with you. The church organization as we know it in America, I would be sad to see some of the traditions that I loved and grew up with go away in the next generation. But I actually think they have to, because I've just seen it as a leader wanting to build a different church. When we get inside those walls every Sunday, 4 Sundays a month, in America particularly, it just draws us to this norm. And now that's a political as well as a religious norm. And we're seeing the outgrowth of that. I do think it's going to have to diminish, and is naturally going to diminish because the millennials are just saying, nah, I'm good, don't need it. So I totally affirm what you're saying.
And I think there's also there's a little promising for me that how many of us, we boomers, I'm assuming you're a boomer.
I'm right on the edge. I'm
okay.
65, so I'm either X or boom. Depending on which list.
Okay, so yeah, I think you're X. My brother is right there, but
born in 65. I'm not 65.
I know what you meant. I knew what you meant. But I think I'm often surprised at how many of us, as hard as it might hear this word awakened, these woke souls, it applies. There is a coming to Jesus moment. I'm sorry, I'm filled with cliches all of a sudden, but there really is. And honestly can't point to one time that it happened that said, okay, this is it. If this happens, then I'm done. It was always happening. And I think for many of us, and I do think that there's many because I hear from them all the time that I can't leave the church because what will my family think? So you still have a lot of people fake it in the pews, but I think that generationally, I am surprised at the number, and I'm heartened by it, that there's so many that are in the boomers and the millennials that are part of this voice that says that things must change.
Yeah. I'm impressed that you have made that journey at the time in life when you did. That says a lot about you. And what I love, and I'll edit in some videos for people when we show this, but you are like creative and crazy. And like you said, you're willing to do some pretty outrageous things to just entertain us as well as love on us with your TikTok. So how did this TikTok thing evolve for you and you become such a major TikTok star?
Okay, so one of the wisest things I did when I felt like, okay, I'm going to try to create some kind of online presence and ministry, if you will, I did have a PR consultant who was helping me, and we created a strategy for Facebook and Instagram and the website, your traditional things. But here's what's really crazy. When you talk about those spiritual nudges, it was as powerful as what I heard the call to ministry, go to TikTok. Okay, I've heard this before in my life. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to go try it. So it wasn't even part of the plan. And I'm telling you, we're talking a plan. It had many pages. We walked it. We did it meticulously. But I said, okay, I'm adding this column that's called TikTok. I don't know what I'm going to do over here, but we're just going to go, we're going to do it. And they're like, okay, we know nothing about it. So you just go do your thing. And then all of a sudden, I don't remember how soon I had my first viral video that's now over 3 million views. So I learned by trial and error, a lot of Googling. Okay, now how do I make that ghost effect? Oh, that doesn't look good. And just the one thing I knew, the one thing I absolutely knew is, because it's funny because I have people who request, can you teach us TikTok secrets? Oh, good Lord, no. You do not. I can tell you what not to do, but that being consistent, but I knew that. Yes, I have a passion for animals. And yes, there was a time where I was amazing a wedding cake decorator. And I'm thinking, oh, that will be fun to show. Nope. I'm staying in this lane because this is what this is about. There's something working here. It is definitely trial and error. If you could see how many of the failed videos are in my drafts, and it's work. And I know that it is a lot of work, but it's part of, I see it now as part of the sacred activism, the sacred ministry. So it started to shift from something that was just like, this will be fun. Let's see what happens. Oh, can I learn that dance kind of thing, to wait, something's happening here. And I don't quite know what the defining moment was, but to the point where I see this is a sacred, powerful ministry. And so every once in a while, I've never told anyone this.
Here we go.
But I'll go through, it's going to be another one of those emotional moments. I'll go through my followers and I'll just scroll through them and I pray. And I express gratitude for their presence. And I hope that whatever I'm about to post or say heals them, helps them heal on their healing journey.
Yeah, that heart comes through. It's wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, my story is very similar. I just love your heart. You're making me tear up here too. Like you say, what's that spiritual nudge? In our tradition, we would say God told us. We feel like heaven speaks to us, to our soul. And so I've been doing social media strong for a few years, and Facebook and Instagram. And the night before the election, November 2nd, I told my wife, I said, I think I've been taking a jackhammer to hardpan, and I think I'm going to get to move to richer pastures that are easier to till. And so I told her, I said, and I think what that looks like is moving from Facebook to TikTok. And I had 6 TikTok followers at the time. And so that was on a Monday, right? The election was Tuesday. So Thursday, I open up TikTok when I get up in the morning and I'm like, something's wrong. Honey, I told my wife, something's wrong. It says I have 2,200 followers. This has to be wrong. And I had done a video, just like you said, I did a video on why I didn't vote for Donald Trump, or why I wasn't going to vote for Donald Trump, or whatever it was. And that thing had taken off, and it's just crazy. And so I went from 6 followers to 3,000 in a snap. And so you know how it goes from there. But I'm with you. I feel like there's something, and I know it's supposed to be Chinese and they're stealing all our data and all of that, but there's something really special about the generation on TikTok. I love the creativity of all the young people on there. And so I think God may have prompted us both, whatever that looks like spiritually, to go to a place where there is a really rich pasture for working with hearts and seeing great things happen in people's lives.
And with that, I'll say amen. And one thing that I also notice that I find reassuring and affirming for what we're doing is sometimes it's you post a video or someone else, I just got that message. I just did that. I hope they don't think I'm copying from them, because I got that message too. And now it's, you know what, I'm just going to go with it, because I do believe in that same kind of mysterious, mystical, divine connection that's speaking to us in ways that we don't understand on this side of heaven. And I believe that goes out. And if we're listening, then we get it. And I also think the other reason that I think this is working, it's not just a whim, if you will, that we're getting the followers that we are, because look at the comments. Look at your lives. I'm sure your DM is filled like mine is. People they are interested. They have questions. They're hurting. They want paths. They want direction. This isn't just a place for them to look at the old people entertaining them. They are here to be shepherded.
Yeah.
This is a pastoral care.
Yeah. The Christian blogger, author, Rachel Held Evans. I don't know if you know Rachel, but she passed away a few years ago, but her book, Searching for Sunday, the line that always got me in that was, she talked about how when you're in a church community, if you're sick, people take care of you. And if you have a baby, people bring casseroles over to your house. And as they told their pastor, they were leaving their church when she just finally couldn't stay in anymore. As they were driving away, she said she just lost it. And she said, who's going to bring us casseroles when we have a baby? Oh. And I think that's the space that people like you are filling. And it is emotional because, the messages I get from people they've had a death in the family, particularly around COVID time, or a young lady the other day that said, I have terminal cancer, and they don't have that faith community to turn to. It's a big honor and something I don't take lightly to be able to say, hey, let's come around this person. Mm-hmm. So it's really special. And I think it's something special that's happening in our society. Yes. So it's really cool. And that you would go to learn dances to draw people. And I'm sure you get this. I sometimes hear, oh, you're just trying to get followers, or you're just trying to get famous. But yeah, we're trying to spread this message, and I love it.
Yeah, the first time I got that comment, it did get me. It tripped me up. And then I realized that it's those comments 100% of the time are coming from people with 10 followers. And so there's a sense of, you got to consider the source. And that's where, especially for someone who is on a healing journey to recover from religious trauma, because I know I still have mine there as well. And I'm constantly making sure that I'm not filtering something through a toxic belief system. Oop, there it is. Did I just doubt something about my path? What am I doing? But what I see there is the very thing that they wish they had. And so I understand the jealousy. I understand that they're going to lash out. And so that comes from a place of longing, and they're not processing their own envy in a healthy way. But the first one, it was like, what? No, I'm going to do a 14-part series on why I'm not doing that. And then, okay, wait, let's pause and give that some spiritual reflection and contemplation and figure out, okay, what just triggered you to want to protect that? And there's a couple of things going on for us. First of all, now you have an intrinsic value inside your audience, and it is our responsibility to protect that. So I do have boundaries of course I allow dialogue, and you see the pushback that I get. I'm sure you're getting the same. So it's not a matter about that, but my walls are really high and the moat is really deep. So if you're going to hit certain things, you're going to be just blocked out, because I don't have time to deal with your toxicity, because I can't take on one-on-one care with you. I can see what it is. So I'm just going to remove you, because I've got to make sure that the people here feel safe, seen, loved, and heard. So, that's a good test for us in our own physical vessel. What is it that just triggered in us? But
I think we have to be protective of the souls that we're bringing in that do have that trauma. And
absolutely,
I do find I try to be kind. I actually did a video yesterday where I told a guy to take his Bible and shove it up his ass, and my followers loved it. And so I just felt it was time. It was time to really tell somebody what I thought about it.
I got to make a note of that, because I missed that video. But I'll have to go find it. You've seen some of my videos, and I don't know. In the comments, I'm certainly pushing back with a more candid flavor. I'm not tolerating it. So I think that is absolutely within our sacred right to whatever it takes to create that boundary that we need to continue to minister to the people we need to minister to. We're no longer, now I'm not speaking for you, but in my experience, I say, make sure I'm not trying to put the same rule book over my spiritual journey that I rejected from that. And sometimes it still wants to be there. No, you can't say that. You can't curse. You can't use swear words. No, it's different now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I just try to check in. Am I trying to win the argument now? And
Yeah.
that I don't want to get there, because
Right.
then that's when my heart is not being healthy in it. But if I truly think, hey, I'm protecting the rest of the gang here, then I feel Jesus was pretty catty with some of the guys. So I feel pretty
There you go. Good.
Well, I love what you're doing. I appreciate that you reached out and we got to connect. And so it's fun to walk this walk with you. And I'm learning from you and watching you and admiring you. And so it's really fun to connect. And I appreciate you sharing some of your journey with us today.
It is an honor to be here. I am honored to be called a colleague and a fellow TikToker.
I'm honored too. So where do people find you?
You can find me at Rev Karla with a K on TikTok and Instagram, as well as Facebook. And my website is revkarla.com.
Awesome. Karla, thanks for hanging out with me on the podcast today.
I'm honored. Thank you.